He stood before 100 of their friends, family, and the city's elite, raising a champagne flute to his new perfect bride. With a smug grin, he glanced at his ex-wife Elara seated in the back and made a toast to his upgrade. He mocked the simple life she now lived, the dream she'd abandoned for him, and the woman she'd become. The room filled with polite, knowing laughter. What he didn't know was that the woman he was publicly humiliating was on the verge of signing a contract that would redefine power in their city. While he was celebrating his wedding, she was about to close a deal that would make his entire fortune look like pocket change. This is the story of how one night of humiliation became the catalyst for the ultimate revenge, monumental success. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a statement. Thick, cream-colored cardstock with the names Ethan Hayes and Tiffany Sterling embossed in shimmering rose gold foil. It felt heavy in Elara Vance's hands, heavy with the weight of 5 years of a life she had meticulously built, and then just as meticulously dismantled for him. She traced the sharp, elegant calligraphy. The wedding was to be held at the St. Regis in Manhattan, a place she and Ethan had once dreamed of celebrating their own 10th anniversary. Now he was celebrating his new beginning there with a woman whose father, Marcus Sterling, owned half of the tech real estate in the tri-state area. Elara and Ethan's story had started like a Silicon Valley fairy tale. They met at Stanford. She was a prodigy in computational linguistics on a fast track to a PhD, and he was a charismatic MBA student with a knack for seeing market trends. He was captivated by her brilliance, her ability to see patterns in data that others missed. She was charmed by his ambition and the way he made her feel like the center of the universe. "We're a team, Ellie." He'd always set his hand on the small of her back. "You're the brains, I'm the face. Together, we'll build an empire." She believed him. When his startup idea, a niche B2B software solution, started gaining traction, he asked her to take a leave of absence from her doctorate program. "Just for a year, Ellie. To help me get this off the ground. Your research is theoretical. This is real-world impact." 1 year became 2, then 3. Her name was never on the company letterhead, but her algorithms were its backbone. Her market analysis dictated their strategy. She was the ghost in his machine, the silent partner who powered his meteoric rise. He became Ethan Hayes, the visionary founder of Apex Solutions. She remained Elara Vance, his brilliant, supportive wife who handled things behind the scenes. Then came the sale of Apex for $80 million. Ethan was a star. He was featured in Forbes, lauded as a genius. In interviews, he'd thank my wife for her unwavering support. The word support felt like a dagger. It was the word you used for someone who made coffee and picked up dry cleaning, not for the architect of the entire enterprise. With the money came a new circle of friends, a new lifestyle, and a new woman. Tiffany Sterling was everything Elara wasn't. She was polished, poised, and came from old money. She didn't challenge Ethan. She adorned him. The divorce was quiet but brutal. He called her unambitious. "Look at you, Ellie. You're 32, and what have you done? You don't even have your degree. I've moved on to bigger things. You're still here." His gaslighting was so effective she almost believed him. He gave her a generous settlement of $5 million, and their modest Palo Alto home, framing it as a gift rather than the pittance it was compared to her contribution. For the first year, Elara drifted. The woman who once wrote code that could predict market fluctuations with 98% accuracy now had trouble deciding what to buy at the grocery store. The mockery in Ethan's voice echoed in her quiet house. She was a ghost in her own life. But brilliance, even when suppressed, doesn't simply vanish. It smolders. One rainy afternoon, sorting through old university papers, she found her doctoral thesis proposal. It was an idea she'd had years ago, a concept so far ahead of its time that her own professors had called it theoretically fascinating but practically impossible. It was a dynamic, self-learning logistics network, an AI that could not only manage a supply chain, but predict and neutralize disruptions before they even happened. She called it Project Chimera. For the next 2 years, that project became her entire world. She sold the Palo Alto house, moved into a small nondescript apartment in San Jose, and poured almost every cent of her settlement into building a prototype. She hired two of the brightest young coders she could find working out of a rented office space above a laundromat. They knew her only as Ms. Vance, a quiet, intensely focused woman who seemed to subsist on black coffee and sheer force of will. Chimera was no longer impossible. With the advancements in machine learning and quantum computing, it was revolutionary. It had the potential to upend global shipping, manufacturing, and retail trillions of dollars of industry. She knew it, and so did a few very quiet, very powerful people she'd begun demonstrating it to, which brought her back to the invitation. Her first instinct was to burn it. Why would she subject herself to this public spectacle of her replacement? Her therapist, Dr. Miller, had a different take. Closure, Elara. You're not going for him. You're going for you. To see the cage you escaped from and to quietly for yourself recognize the woman you've become since. So she RSVP'd yes. She picked out a simple, elegant navy blue dress, understated but confident. As she packed her small overnight bag for the flight to New York, she also packed her laptop. She had a final stage virtual meeting scheduled for later that night with a potential investor. It was a long shot, a huge reclusive European conglomerate known for making bold, decisive moves. They were notoriously difficult, but if they bit, it would change everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from her lead programmer, Ben. The final simulation is perfect. The algorithm is practically singing. You built something incredible, Elara. A small, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time that day. She was no longer just Ethan Hayes' ex-wife. She was the architect of Chimera. And as she walked out the door to catch her flight, she felt a sliver of power she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't walking into her past. She was walking through it on the way to her future, the St. Regis ballroom was a symphony of excess. Towering floral arrangements of white orchids and roses scented the air, their fragrance mingling with the expensive perfumes of the guests. A string quartet played softly in the corner as waiters in crisp tuxedos navigated the crowd with trays of champagne and caviar blinis. It was a world away from her 20-hour workdays in the sterile, fluorescent-lit office in San Jose. Elara found her assigned table in the back, tucked away near the service entrance, a clear afterthought. She was seated with a distant cousin of Ethan's and a few of his old college friends who offered her tight, pitying smiles. They made small talk, carefully avoiding the billion-dollar elephant in the room, the man at the head table glowing with triumph. Ethan looked like a king in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He was laughing, one arm draped possessively around Tiffany, who was breathtaking in a Vera Wang gown that shimmered with thousands of hand-sewn crystals. She was perfect, an immaculate porcelain doll. Every time Ethan looked at her, it was with a look of smug satisfaction, the look of a man who believed he had acquired the rarest piece in a collection. Elara focused on her water glass, trying to be a ghost, a fly on the wall. But she couldn't help but overhear the snippets of conversation around her. "Can you believe he invited her, a woman with a severe blonde bob?" whispered at the next table. "It's so awkward. I heard he did it to be magnanimous," her companion snickered. "More like he wanted a front row seat to her misery. She really let herself go after the divorce." Each word was a small paper cut. Elara steeled herself, repeating Dr. Miller's words in her head. "You are here for you. This is not your life anymore." The dinner service was a blur of exquisite tiny portions of food she barely tasted. Finally, the clinking of a glass quieted the room. Ethan's best man, his old business partner, gave a bland, predictable speech. Then Marcus Sterling, the father of the bride, took the stage. His speech was less of a toast and more of a corporate merger announcement, speaking of the powerful alliance between the Hayes and Sterling families. Then Ethan stood up. He held his champagne flute high, his eyes sweeping the room before landing deliberately on Elara. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "And I want to thank my beautiful bride, Tiffany. You have brought a light into my life that I didn't know was missing." He paused for effect, letting the room awe on cue. "You know," he continued, his gaze still fixed on Elara, "they say you learn from your past relationships. And it's true. My first marriage taught me an incredible amount. It taught me about potential, about the difference between a comfortable starting point and a truly ambitious destination." The air in the room shifted. It was no longer a wedding toast. It was a public execution. Elara felt hundreds of pairs of eyes turned towards her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained a mask of calm neutrality. "It taught me that while support is wonderful, a partner who elevates you, who challenges you to conquer worlds, is the real prize. My life with Apex Solutions, that was Act 1. It was a great little opening act. But my life with Tiffany, with the Sterling family, this is the main event." He raised his glass higher. "So I'd like to propose a toast. First to my wife, my partner, my ultimate upgrade in every sense of the word, Tiffany." The room applauded as he kissed his bride. Then he turned back, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "And a toast to Elara. Thank you for the lessons, and I sincerely wish you all the best in whatever it is you're doing now in that little apartment in San Jose. I hope you find your own Act 1 someday, to the past and to leaving it exactly where it belongs." A wave of polite, uncomfortable laughter rippled through the ballroom. His friends from the head table laughed the loudest. It was a perfectly crafted insult designed to showcase him as a powerful man who had outgrown his simple starter wife, while simultaneously painting her as a small, forgotten relic. For a split second the world tilted. Elara felt the sting of 1,000 betrayals, the late nights she'd worked on his code, the academic conferences she'd skipped to support his networking, the brilliant ideas she'd fed him over dinner that he presented as his own the next day. All of it reduced to a punchline. But then something inside her snapped. The humiliation didn't break her. It cauterized a wound she hadn't realized was still festering. The last lingering thread of affection or nostalgia for the man he once was, or the man she thought he was, evaporated. In its place was a cold, clean clarity. She didn't storm out. She didn't cry. She simply picked up her clutch, met the gaze of a few of the pitying onlookers with a steady, unreadable expression, and stood. She walked, not ran towards the exit, her back perfectly straight. She didn't look back at him. He no longer deserved even a glance. As the heavy ballroom doors swung shut behind her, muffling the sound of the band striking up a cheerful tune, she felt a profound sense of release. He thought he had won. He thought he had delivered the final crushing blow. He had no idea he had just handed her the one thing she hadn't been able to give herself, the absolute, unequivocal freedom from his memory. She stepped out into the cool Manhattan night, took a deep breath of the city air, and pulled out her phone. She didn't call a friend to cry. She didn't book a flight home. She opened a secure messaging app and typed a single sentence to a contact labeled A.G. Leeson. "I'm available sooner than expected. Is Mr. Croft still on for tonight?" The reply came back in less than 10 seconds. "He is. The car will be at your hotel in 20 minutes. He's looking forward to it." Ethan Hayes was celebrating his past. Elara Vance was about to seize her future. The black Mercedes S-Class slid silently to the curb outside the boutique hotel. Elara had booked a deliberate choice to avoid any chance of running into wedding guests. The driver, a stoic man in a dark suit, held the door for her without a word. The interior was a cocoon of polished wood and soft leather, insulated from the blare of New York City. As the car pulled away, Elara leaned her head back against the seat, the echoes of the ballroom fading. The pitying stares, the cruel laughter, Ethan's smug face. It all felt like a scene from someone else's life. Her focus was crystalline. All the nervous energy, the hurt, the anger, it had been transmuted into pure cold adrenaline. She opened her laptop. The sleek device, her portal to Chimera, glowed in the dim light of the cabin. She ran through the presentation one last time, not out of anxiety, but out of habit. A pilot running a pre-flight check. The data was flawless. The simulations were perfect. The technology was undeniable. The only variable was the human element. The car journeyed deep into the heart of the financial district, stopping before a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds. There was no grand corporate logo on the building, only a discreet brushed steel plaque that read, Aethelred Global. Aethelred was a legend, a ghost in the corporate world. It was a sprawling, privately held conglomerate with holdings in everything from deep-sea mining to satellite technology. They were known for two things: their uncanny ability to predict the next seismic shift in technology and their utterly reclusive CEO, Julian Croft. Croft was an enigma. He never gave interviews, was rarely photographed, and ran his multi-billion-dollar empire with the precision of a chess grandmaster. He was known to invest in people as much as ideas, and his vetting process was notoriously intense. To even get a meeting was a victory. To get one in person at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night was unheard of. Elara was met in the silent marble lobby by a woman with a severe haircut and an impeccably tailored suit. "Ms. Vance, I'm Amelia. Mr. Croft is ready for you." They rode a private elevator that moved with unnerving speed and silence, opening directly into the penthouse office. The space was not what she expected. There were no mahogany desks or ostentatious displays of wealth. It was a vast, minimalist expanse with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360-degree view of the glittering Manhattan skyline. The only furniture was a simple, low-slung sofa, 2 chairs, and a large, dark wooden table in the center of the room. A man stood by the window, his back to her, looking out at the city. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple dark sweater and trousers. When he turned, she was struck by his eyes. They were a pale, piercing blue, and they seemed to see everything. This was Julian Croft. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice a quiet baritone with a faint British accent. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Croft," Elara replied, her voice steady. He gestured to the table. "No formalities, no PowerPoint, just you, me, and the idea. I've read your white paper. I've had my tech teams in Zurich run every simulation they can on the data you provided. They say what you've built is impossible. They say it's a decade ahead of schedule." "They're right about the second part," Elara said, a flicker of a smile on her face. He matched her smile, a brief, sharp expression. "I like that. Confidence, not arrogance. There's a difference. My team tells me the code is elegant, self-correcting in a way they've never seen. They tell me the potential market disruption is incalculable. What they can't tell me is about the architect. Who are you, Elara Vance?" This was the real test. He didn't ask about her credentials or her business plan. He asked who she was. She didn't tell him about Ethan, about Apex Solutions, about the humiliation she had just endured. That was the story of the woman she used to be. She told him about her fascination with complex systems, about the moment she realized that the global supply chain was a living, chaotic organism that could be understood and tamed. She spoke of the years of solitary work, the failures, the breakthroughs. She spoke not as a victim, but as a creator. She opened her laptop, and for the next hour she walked him through Chimera. She didn't just show him code, she showed him its soul. She ran a simulation based on a real-world event, the 2021 Suez Canal obstruction. She demonstrated how Chimera, with its predictive analytics, would have rerouted hundreds of ships weeks in advance, anticipating the bottleneck based on minute deviations in maritime traffic and weather patterns, saving billions of dollars in a matter of hours. Croft listened, interjecting with sharp, insightful questions that showed a deep understanding of the technology. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a builder. "You've created a central nervous system for global commerce," he said, finally leaning back in his chair, his blue eyes boring into her. "And you've done it essentially alone on a shoestring budget with a team of 2 recent graduates." "Passion is a powerful resource," Elara stated simply. "Indeed it is. But it doesn't scale. You need infrastructure, data centers, a global sales force, security. You're at the end of your runway, Ms. Vance. You know it, and I know it. You've come to us for a seed round. Series A funding. The standard pitch. He stood up and walked back to the window. Elara's heart sank slightly. Was he dismissing her? Aethelred Global doesn't do standard, he said, turning back to face her. The lights of the city framed him like a halo. We don't plant acorns and wait for them to grow. We buy forests. He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. We're not interested in a Series A investment, Ms. Vance. We are prepared tonight to make a formal offer to acquire Vance Innovations and the Chimera project in its entirety. Elara's breath caught in her throat. This was not what she had expected. An acquisition was the endgame, something she'd dreamed of years down the line. My team has prepared the paperwork, Croft continued as if discussing the weather. The offer is for a full cash and equity buyout. We will provide all the resources, all the infrastructure you need. You will be named CEO of the new Aethelred Logistics division with full autonomy to develop Chimera to its ultimate potential. We build the playground. You provide the magic. He slid a sleek, dark tablet across the table. On the screen, a single document was displayed. Elara's eyes scanned the text, her mind racing to process the legal jargon. Then she saw the number at the bottom of the page. She had to read it twice to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. It wasn't a venture capital investment of 10 or 20 million. It wasn't even the $100 million valuation she had secretly hoped for in her wildest dreams. The offer was for $1.2 billion. $1, $200, $1,000. She stared at the number, and in her mind's eye she saw Ethan's face contorted in that smug, mocking grin as he toasted her little life. She thought of the $5 million generous settlement. She thought of the years she had spent making him successful only to be discarded. A single silent tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or of anger. It was a tear of overwhelming, earth-shattering vindication. Julian Croft watched her, his expression unreadable. Is there a problem? Ms. Vance Elara looked up from the tablet, her eyes clear and shining with a newfound fire. She wiped the tear away with the back of her hand. No, Mr. Croft, she said, her voice completely even. There is no problem at all. She picked up the stylus. With a steady hand she placed her digital signature on the line. The ink flowed, a simple scrawl of a name that was now worth over $1 billion. As the signature was accepted with a quiet chime, she felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She wasn't just free. She was powerful. And the world was about to find out. Elara left the Aethelred building just before 1 a.m. The city was quieter now, the air holding the specific stillness of the early morning hours. She didn't take the waiting car back to her hotel. She chose to walk. The crisp night air felt good on her face, a stark contrast to the stuffy opulence of the wedding and the sterile, high-stakes atmosphere of Croft's office. Each step on the pavement felt different. The city lights seemed brighter, the buildings taller. She was seeing the world through new eyes, the eyes of a woman who had just had her entire reality fundamentally rewritten. A billionaire. The title felt alien, absurd. She wasn't Elara Vance, the scorned ex-wife. She wasn't Elara Vance, the struggling startup founder. She was Elara Vance, the new CEO of Aethelred Logistics. She stopped at a 24-hour diner, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of old coffee. She ordered a black coffee and a slice of apple pie. As she sat there anonymous among the city's night owls, a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. It was the first truly happy, unburdened smile she'd had in years. The deal wasn't just about the money, it was the validation. Julian Croft hadn't seen Ethan Hayes' discarded wife. He had seen a brilliant architect of technology and handed her the keys to an empire. Meanwhile, 30 blocks north, the wedding reception for Ethan and Tiffany Hayes was winding down. The last of the guests were departing, leaving behind a trail of wilting flowers and empty champagne glasses. Ethan was on top of the world. He had his trophy wife, the blessing of her powerful father, and he had delivered a public coup de grace to the ghost of his past. He felt invincible. He and Tiffany retired to the presidential suite, a sprawling space overlooking Central Park. As Tiffany went to slip into something more comfortable, Ethan, still buzzing from the champagne and his own ego, checked his phone. He scrolled through the fawning text messages from his friends. "Man, that toast was brutal. Legendary. You really put her in her place. Classy. Welcome to the big leagues, my friend." He grinned, pouring himself a final glass of whiskey. Everything was perfect. He was falling into a deep, satisfied sleep when the first tremors of the earthquake that would shatter his world began. It started with a single email notification at 4:15 a.m. from a Wall Street Journal news alert. The subject line was stark: Aethelred Global makes shock 1.2B acquisition of mystery AI logistics firm Vance Innovations. Ethan's blood ran cold. Vance Innovations. It had to be a coincidence. Some other Vance. He clicked the link, his hand shaking slightly. The first line of the article hit him like a physical blow. In a stunning late-night move that has sent ripples through the tech and logistics sectors, the notoriously reclusive Aethelred Global, helmed by Julian Croft, has acquired the entirety of Vance Innovations, a stealth-mode startup founded by computational linguistics expert Elara Vance. Elara Vance. His Elara. He read on his breath catching in his chest. The article detailed the revolutionary nature of the Chimera project, calling it the holy grail of supply chain management. It quoted anonymous sources from Aethelred calling it the most elegant and disruptive piece of code we have seen this century. And then there was the photo. It was a recent picture of Elara, one he'd never seen. She was looking directly at the camera, her expression calm, confident, and utterly devoid of the sad lost woman he remembered. She looked powerful. His phone began to vibrate violently on the nightstand. It was Marcus Sterling, Ethan's new father-in-law. He answered, his mouth suddenly dry. "Did you see it?" Marcus's voice wasn't congratulatory. It was a low, dangerous growl. "Marcus, I just saw it. I had no idea." "You had no idea," Marcus roared, his voice cracking with fury. "Your ex-wife, the woman you lived with for 5 years, the woman you told me was an unambitious academic who couldn't finish a thesis, just sold a piece of technology for over $1 billion. Technology, I might add, that directly competes with 2 of my biggest port and shipping investments. I swear, Marcus, she was doing nothing. She was living off the settlement I gave her." "The settlement you gave her?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You gave her $5 million and she turned it into $1 billion too. And you fool, you let her walk away. You didn't even know what you had. I didn't form an alliance with you for your charm, Ethan. I did it because I thought you were smart. A shark. I thought you could identify assets. It turns out you can't even identify the asset sleeping in your own bed." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, his mind reeling. The smug satisfaction of the evening had curdled into a thick, choking dread. He looked around the opulent hotel suite at the new life he had been so proud of, and it suddenly felt cheap and fragile. Tiffany emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a silk robe. "Who was that, darling? Is everything okay?" He couldn't meet her eyes. He just held out the phone, the screen still glowing with the news article and Elara's powerful face. Tiffany read it, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising higher and higher, the color drained from her cheeks. When she finally looked up at him, her expression wasn't one of sympathy or support. It was a look he had never seen before on her face, a cold, calculating assessment, a look of profound disappointment. $1 billion, Ethan," she whispered, her voice laced with ice. "The woman you called your starter wife." In that moment, Ethan Hayes understood. He hadn't just lost a ghost from his past. He had lost his future. He had mocked Elara for her Act 1, but the terrifying reality dawning on him was that his own main event had just been exposed as a cheap imitation. The real show was just beginning, and he wasn't even invited. The sun was beginning to rise over New York City, casting long shadows across his perfect suite. For Elara Vance, it was the dawn of a new empire. For Ethan Hayes, it was the beginning of a long, dark night. The news of the Aethelred Vance deal hit the financial world like a thunderclap. By Monday morning, it was the lead story on Bloomberg, Forbes, and TechCrunch. The Ghost of Silicon Valley: How Elara Vance Built a Billion-Dollar Company in Secret. The narrative was intoxicating. A brilliant woman pushed out of the spotlight reemerges with a world-changing technology. Her backstory with Ethan and Apex Solutions, once a footnote, was now being re-examined with a critical new lens. Anonymous sources from their old company began talking to reporters, hinting that many of Apex's visionary ideas had originated with Elara. The story was no longer just about a tech deal. It was about a reckoning. For Elara, the days that followed were a whirlwind. She was working out of a temporary office in the Aethelred Tower that was larger than her entire San Jose apartment. She had a team of lawyers, publicists, and assistants. Julian Croft was true to his word. He gave her complete autonomy, and his teams provided unwavering support, handling the tidal wave of media and logistics so she could focus on integrating Chimera. She did one and only one interview. It was with a respected female journalist from the Wall Street Journal. She spoke eloquently about technology, about the future of global commerce, and about the passion that drove her. When the journalist gently broached the subject of her past, Elara's answer was a masterclass in understated power. "I believe every experience, good or bad, is a data point," she said calmly. "You can either let it be a corrupted file that slows down your system, or you can use it to learn and build a more robust, efficient operating model for your own life. I chose the latter." She never mentioned Ethan's name. She didn't have to. The world read between the lines, and the verdict was unanimous. For Ethan, the world was shrinking. The fawning texts from his friends had been replaced by an awkward silence. Business associates who once clamored for his attention were now screening his calls. At his own VC firm, his partners looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. He had been their rainmaker, the man with the golden gut. Now he was the man who had fumbled a billion-dollar opportunity. He was a laughingstock. The hardest blow came from his own father-in-law. Marcus Sterling summoned him to his cavernous office overlooking the harbor. "The board is concerned," Marcus said, not even bothering to offer Ethan a seat. "My port holdings have dropped 8% since the announcement. My competitors are already in talks with Aethelred. Your ex-wife's little project is going to cost me hundreds of millions before it even fully launches." "Marcus, we can fight this." Ethan pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can build a competitor. I know how she thinks, I know her weaknesses." Marcus cut him off with a cold, dismissive wave of his hand. "You know her weaknesses. You didn't even know her strengths. You're a liability to me now, Ethan. The story has made you look like a fool, and by extension it makes me look like a fool for bringing you into the family, into my business. The optics are a disaster." The implication was clear. The powerful alliance was fractured. Ethan was no longer a partner. He was a problem to be managed. His home life was no better. The warmth and adoration from Tiffany had vanished, replaced by a brittle politeness. The life he had married into was predicated on the image of power and success. Now that his image was tarnished, he could feel the foundations of his new marriage cracking. One evening he found her in their walk-in closet, a sea of designer bags and shoes, staring at her phone. She was on Elara's new verified Instagram profile. It was mostly professional pictures of her new team, architectural renderings of the Aethelred Logistics campus. The latest post was a simple photo of Elara and Julian Croft standing beside a prototype of a quantum server deep in conversation. They looked like partners equals. "They say he's grooming her to be his successor," Tiffany said quietly, her voice flat. "They say Aethelred has never had a CEO of a division rise so fast." Can you imagine? Her Ethan felt a surge of irrational, bitter rage. "This is a fluke, Tiff. A one-hit wonder. She got lucky." Tiffany finally looked at him, her eyes cold and clear. "Did she? Ethan? Or was she brilliant all along and you were just too arrogant to see it? My father says the worst mistake a man can make is to underestimate the person who knows all his secrets. You didn't just underestimate her. You insulted her. In front of everyone." She turned back to her phone, dismissing him. The message was clear. He hadn't just been wrong. He had been a fool, and his foolishness had cost them. The status, the power, the admiration, it had all been tied to Elara, and he had thrown it all away. Desperate, Ethan started digging. He hired a private investigator to find dirt on Elara, on Julian Croft, on Aethelred. He was looking for a flaw, a vulnerability, something he could use to claw back some leverage. The investigator's report came back a week later, and it was devastatingly clean. Elara's life for the past 2 years had been nothing but work. Aethelred Global was a financial fortress utterly impenetrable. The report did contain one interesting tidbit, however. It was the address of her new residence, not a permanent home, but a corporate penthouse suite Aethelred had secured for her at the Mandarin Oriental. Driven by a toxic cocktail of fury, jealousy, and a sliver of pathetic hope that he could somehow reason with her, Ethan made a decision. He was going to see her. He was going to confront the ghost who had come back to haunt him, not realizing he was the one who was already dead and buried. The lobby of the Mandarin Oriental was a world of quiet, understated luxury. It was a place where power didn't need to shout. Ethan felt a prickle of sweat on his neck as he approached the concierge. His own bravado, which had carried him through boardrooms and investor meetings, felt hollow here. "I'm here to see Elara Vance," he said, trying to sound casual. The concierge, a woman with an unnervingly calm demeanor, glanced at her screen. "I'm sorry, sir, but Ms. Vance has a strict no-visitors policy unless they are on her pre-approved list. Your name is not on it." The casual rejection was more infuriating than an outright fight. "I'm her ex-husband," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Just tell her Ethan Hayes is here." The concierge's expression didn't flicker. "I can certainly pass along the message, sir, but I can't allow you to go up." Just as Ethan was about to argue, a calm voice cut through the air. "It's all right, Sarah. I'll take care of it." Elara stood by the elevator bank. She wasn't in a power suit or a designer dress. She was wearing simple black trousers and a soft gray cashmere sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She looked comfortable, relaxed, and utterly in control. The frantic, insecure energy radiating from Ethan was a stark contrast to her profound stillness. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice even and devoid of any emotion. "You shouldn't have come here." She led him not up to her suite, but to a small private lounge off the lobby. It was empty. They sat in armchairs placed on opposite sides of a low glass table. For a moment they just looked at each other. He was seeing a stranger. The last time he had seen her, she was a guest at his wedding, an object of his ridicule. Now she was on the cover of Wired magazine. "Ellie, He began, falling back on the old pet name. It sounded foreign and pathetic on his tongue. "It's Elara," she corrected him gently, but with the firmness of a closed door. He took a deep breath, shifting tactics. He tried for contrition. "Look, Elara, I came here to apologize. The toast. It was a stupid, drunken mistake. I was an idiot. I'm sorry." She simply nodded, waiting. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. "What you've done, it's incredible." He continued, his voice laced with a false sincerity that was almost painful to hear. "I always knew you had it in you. I always pushed you to be your best. This was too much." A small, humorless smile touched Elara's lips. "You pushed me, Ethan. You pushed me into a corner. You convinced me my ambitions were secondary to yours. You took my work, my ideas, and you built your Act 1 on my back. Don't rewrite history now. The official record is quite clear." His face flushed. The mask of contrition fell away, revealing the raw, desperate man beneath. "Fine, fine. You want to talk business? Let's talk business. That technology, Chimera, the foundational concepts, we talked about them. We talked about them over dinner in bed. Those were our ideas. I have a claim to it, Elara. A moral claim, if not a legal one. I helped shape you. I made you who you are. Elara leaned forward slightly, her calm demeanor finally cracking, not with anger but with something that looked like pity. "Let me be very clear, Ethan, so there are no misunderstandings. You didn't shape me. You suppressed me. The best parts of me, the most brilliant parts, are the ones that survived in spite of you, not because of you." Chimera wasn't born from our dinner conversations. It was born in the silence of the house after you left. It was built with the money you thought was a payoff to make me disappear. It was fueled by every condescending word and every dismissive glance you ever gave me. You think you have a claim. You were the negative space, the absence that allowed the real work to begin. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart puncturing his ego, his denial, his entire sense of self. He stared at her speechless. He had come here expecting tears or anger or perhaps a negotiation. He was not prepared for this surgical, dispassionate dismantling of his reality. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, the fight gone from his voice. "What will it take to make you stop? Is this all revenge for the wedding?" Elara leaned back in her chair, and for the first time she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but it was genuine. It was the laugh of someone who had just heard the most absurd thing in the world. "Oh, Ethan, you still think this is about you." The wedding wasn't the cause. It was a catalyst. A final data point that confirmed a conclusion I had already reached. You mocked me, and in doing so, you severed the last sentimental wire that connected me to our past. You set me free. I should probably thank you for that. She stood up, the conversation clearly over. This isn't revenge, Ethan. Revenge is a transaction. It's a petty emotional exchange. This, she said, gesturing vaguely to the opulent hotel, to the city outside, to her new life. This is a cosmic correction. The universe balancing the books. You don't factor into the equation at all anymore. She looked at him one last time, at the man who had once been her entire world. He looked small, defeated, a relic of a life she no longer lived. "The best thing you ever did for me was leave," she said softly. "The second best thing you did was show me in front of 100 people exactly who you are. Now I know. And now so does everyone else. Goodbye, Ethan." She turned and walked away, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. She didn't look back. Ethan Hayes sat alone in the quiet lounge for a long time, the weight of her words crushing him. She hadn't come to destroy his new life. She had simply built a new one of her own, so vast and brilliant that it cast his entire existence into shadow. He wasn't her villain. He wasn't her rival. He was irrelevant. And that, he realized, was the most devastating defeat of all. 6 months later, Elara Vance stood behind a podium addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos. The audience was a sea of the world's most powerful people, heads of state, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and global thought leaders. She spoke about the future of AI and global infrastructure, and she held them all in rapt attention. She was no longer a ghost or a mystery. She was a titan. Aethelred Logistics, under her leadership, had already revolutionized shipping for a dozen major corporations. Chimera was everything she had promised, and more. She was respected, admired, and in complete command of her destiny. Julian Croft had become a mentor and a friend. He saw in her the same relentless drive he possessed, and he was, as Tiffany had heard, quietly grooming her for a future far beyond a single division. Her life was full. She worked hard, but she also traveled, reconnected with old friends from Stanford, and was even learning to sail. The anger and hurt that had once defined her were gone, replaced by a deep, abiding sense of peace and purpose. She rarely, if ever, thought of Ethan. The empire Ethan had married into, meanwhile, was in decline. Marcus Sterling's shipping businesses, unable to compete with the efficiency of Chimera, were forced into a series of painful mergers. His reputation as an untouchable titan took a severe hit. His powerful alliance with Ethan was formally dissolved when Tiffany Hayes quietly filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The marriage had lasted less than a year. Ethan Hayes was a pariah. His venture capital firm bought out his partnership at a fraction of its former value, eager to remove the stain of his public humiliation. He was a cautionary tale told in hushed tones at Silicon Valley bars, the man who had gold in his hands and threw it in the trash. He lost the wife, the father-in-law, the career, and the reputation. He was left with nothing but his money, which suddenly felt like a very small consolation. The last time anyone saw him, he was at a mid-tier tech conference in Austin, trying to pitch a new idea to a group of young investors who barely paid him any mind. He looked tired and haunted, a man forever living in the shadow of the empire he had let slip through his fingers. One clear, cold evening, Elara was in her office, her real office now a stunning corner space on the 80th floor of the Aethelred Tower. She was looking out the vast window at the endless tapestry of city lights below. It was a view that signified power, success, and ambition. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ben, her first programmer, the kid who had worked with her above the laundromat. He had sent her a link to a society blog. The headline read, "Where Are They Now? The Wreckage of the Hayes-Sterling Wedding." It had a photo of Ethan from the wedding grinning smugly next to a recent haggard-looking paparazzi shot. Elara looked at the photos for a moment. She felt no anger, no triumph, not even a flicker of satisfaction. She felt nothing at all. He was just a data point from a previous version of her operating system long since patched and updated. She deleted the message without a second thought and turned back to the window. She wasn't looking down at the past. She was looking out towards the horizon, towards the infinite shimmering possibilities of the future she was building. Her future. And it was brilliant. Elara Vance's story is a powerful reminder that your value is never ever defined by someone else's opinion. It's a testament to the fact that the ultimate revenge isn't loud or angry. It's the quiet, undeniable hum of your own success. She turned humiliation into motivation and heartbreak into a billion-dollar enterprise, not to prove her ex-husband wrong, but to prove herself right. Her journey shows us that sometimes the worst betrayals can become our greatest liberations, clearing the path for us to build the life we were always meant to live. It reminds us that your past does not have to be your prison. If you were inspired by Elara's incredible journey from the shadows to the boardroom, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their potential is limitless, and subscribe to our channel. We have so many more incredible stories like this to share with you. Click that notification bell so you never miss a single one. Thanks for listening.